Tonight on Catalyst, Paul reveals new findings on arsenic in the environment.
How kids' toenails have revealed a toxic legacy from the gold rush.
Jonica slips into something more comfortable for space travel.
Spacesuits are unwieldy, exhausting, and they can make your fingernails fall out.
And octogenarian Nancy Millis's contribution to science.
G'day, welcome to Catalyst. The gold rushes of the 19th century had a huge impact on Australia, both economically and building our country as a nation. This is the old customs house in Melbourne that back in the 1850s collected $80,000 a month just in gold tax. But it now seems the wonderful wealth of gold comes at a cost. Dr. Paul Willis caught up with researchers at the University of Ballarat who've been studying the ill effects of arsenic, a byproduct of the gold extraction process.
Meet Rose. She's your typical 9-year-old girl.
She's a fairly quiet child, but she certainly enjoys living in this town, and she's got lots of friends right over the whole town.
In fact, there didn't seem to be anything unusual about Rose until she participated in an unusual study conducted in Western Victoria, looking at arsenic in the environment and the children.
It turned out that Rose had the highest levels of all the kids tested, and so, you know, I was naturally quite concerned.
We thought there might be a problem out there because of the arsenic in the soil, so we decided to take a closer look.
And that closer look took a most unusual form. Dora Pearce from the University of Ballarat began to collect toenail clippings from primary school kids from across Western Victoria.
We use toenails because collecting them is non-invasive, they're easy to store, doesn't hurt the children to provide them, and they provide us a timeline over several months of what the kids have been exposed to. Who's got a sample here that they'd like to give me? Oh,
Perhaps
great.
the simplest part of the study was the collection of toenails.
What's your name?
Corey.
The parents cut their child's toenails,
Who's got a
put them in a
sample for
plastic
me?
bag
Thank you
and gave
so
them
much,
to Dora.
Alice. Gosh, how many?
Well, Mr. Sharson, our science teacher, told us about bringing toenails to school, and all the other kids giggled because they thought it was gross, but it's not actually that gross because virtually everybody has them.
The link between arsenic and toenails is a subtle one. If arsenic enters the body, it can be excreted by shunting it into toe and fingernails from hair. But why would there be any extra arsenic across Western Victoria? Western Victoria was once the largest producer of gold in the world. During the Great Gold Rush of the 1850s and 60s, thousands of people from all over the world rushed to this area in search of their fortunes. Most of the gold was found like this, small flecks trapped in quartz. To get it out, you'd crush the whole rock up, releasing the gold and the arsenic. Crushing quartz became an industry on a scale that now seems unimaginable. 100 years later, and Western Victoria is dotted with mullock heaps and tailings heaps like the one behind me. Some of them contain hundreds, if not thousands, of milligrams per kilogram of arsenic. Dora teamed up with Kim Dowling from the University of Ballarat, an expert in arsenic and other toxins in the environment.
In the mining process, arsenic, which is locked in minerals deep in the earth, is brought to the surface, and it's oxidised, which means it can be made more mobile, and so it moves around. And again, that's the thing that can have an impact. It's completely natural, and if it stays here for long enough, it'll age and not be as mobile. But at the moment, throughout the landscape, we've got piles of the stuff.
So Kim suspected that there would be hotspots of arsenic dotted across the old gold diggings. Dora wondered if these presented any threat to public health, and that's why she started collecting toenails. But figuring out how much arsenic there was in a toenail requires a lot of work. And there were limits to what conventional lab techniques could say about how much arsenic there was in a sample and where it came from.
When you generally take a measure of the arsenic in the toenail clippings, what you're getting is an average reading. And so the arsenic concentration at one time point can be much higher than it is at a different time point. So what we really need to be able to measure is arsenic concentration at a given time point, so we know we can relate that back to the actual exposure that caused that.
Dora needed the precision and resolution that could only be achieved by a synchrotron. By using high-energy subatomic particles, a synchrotron can determine exactly what kinds of atoms are present at specific locations down to a few thousandths of a millimetre. Trouble is, when Dora was doing her study, the Melbourne synchrotron hadn't yet come online. She had to go to Chicago. Dora teamed up with Andrea Gerson to help navigate her way through the high-tech world of synchrotrons.
I think with Dora's study, what the synchrotron offered was the ability to map on a micron scale the arsenic distribution within the toenails, and then go back to the regions of interest and interrogate the particular speciation of the arsenic at those positions within the toenails.
Slowly, a pattern built up, not only of how much arsenic there was in the toenail clippings, but more importantly, whereabouts inside the samples the arsenic was located. And these results were astounding.
We found that about 10% of children in our study had toenail arsenic concentrations higher than what might be considered a normal dose, and also we found that about half of the kids had concentrations that were greater than the highest value recorded in a non-gold mining area. But we do need a larger study to confirm those findings.
These astounding figures raise two questions. How are the kids picking up so much arsenic, and was it enough to damage their health?
The arsenic species that we detected in the children's toenail clippings suggested that the arsenic was possibly taken up in two different ways. One way is that the arsenic is absorbed systemically through the body. When the kids are out there playing in the dirt, they possibly ingest it from dirt on their hands because they haven't washed it. Or they can also inhale the arsenic from dust when they're playing out there, especially on the mine waste.
Locals and residents have long known that there is arsenic in the environment, and they take sensible precautions to try and avoid contaminated areas. But Dora's study suggests that simply trying to avoid contamination may not be enough. Rose was one of the participants in the study and one of the first to have her clippings analysed by a synchrotron. Her elevated levels of arsenic were, at first, something of a mystery.
Many people in the goldfields areas would be aware that arsenic's associated with the mine tailings. We certainly wouldn't buy a house directly next to, right on top of something like that. And we'd keep Rose away from those areas.
The second question, was this exposure to arsenic dangerous, would prove more difficult to answer.
We really don't know what a safe level of arsenic in toenails is, especially not in children, because the baseline studies really haven't been able to provide us with that information. Far more work needs to be done in unexposed populations so that we can tell what a background level is.
Dora's toenail study has revealed some worrying facts about arsenic in Western Victoria. But there are thousands of gold mine sites right across the country, and we just don't know how contaminated they are or if the locals are exposed to this historic toxic time bomb.
In fact, there's a raft of metals and other elements that we're interested in. For example, mercury is also in this system. Cadmium. There's a raft of metals that could have impacts on human health. And indeed, one of the reasons that Dora's study is so exciting is we can use that exact same technique to work out where those metals come from and if they are affecting people's health.
There's still far more that needs to be done to further elucidate the type of arsenic that's present in these clippings so we can work out what the general level should be, how the arsenic gets there, and what we need to do to be able to reduce the exposures in these communities.
For kids like Rose, the priority now is to prevent any more arsenic from getting in.
As that awareness grows, across the whole community, if there were sensible things to do, we would certainly do that.
The gold rush was a significant event in Australian history. It formed the foundations for our nationhood. But there is a more toxic legacy left behind by the gold diggers, one that may affect generations of Australians and one that we're only just starting to become aware of.
Later on Catalyst, just how comfortable is a spacesuit?
That's a lot of pressure. Gosh, I can barely move my fingers now.
Now, a big thank you to all the dads who have contributed to our fatherhood project by filling out the online survey. Now, we'll bring those results to you later in the year in a special program, but right now, here's Jonica with an update.
Pregnancy. It's all about mum, right? Well, not this time. Here at Catalyst, we're about to put the focus on fathers.
We're currently filming a big fatherhood science special to be broadcast later this year. And in the meantime, gentlemen, we'd like you to be involved.
For our special, we've been following a group of ordinary Aussie blokes as they go from being footloose and fancy-free to being fathers.
You know what? I have no idea what I'm doing.
You'll meet them later on, but right now, we'd like to hear your stories. Has fatherhood changed you?
This is a typical Friday evening for us.
Have you been sympathising with your partner?
I think I'm starting to pack on the weight a little bit more than I had expected.
What do you think it takes to be a good dad?
This is the boat cot.
Whether you're a new dad, an old hand, or just in the countdown to having a baby, we'd love you to send us a short video diary about it. It might be funny, sad, or just practical advice. Check our website for details. We'd also like to remind you, if you've just had a baby or are about to, please fill out our survey. Your answers and your videos will form part of our 2010 special on fatherhood.
So come on, men of Australia, please join us. This time, it's all about you.
Emeritus Professor Nancy Millis is an octogenarian. Yet she still makes her way into a Melbourne University office here almost every day. After a long career as a fermentation scientist, she really made her mark in the field of genetic manipulation. Let's meet the legendary Nancy Millis.
I had a phone call saying, would I be willing to be on a stamp? I thought, good grief, how on earth did this happen? I was even further astonished because I would never have seen myself in that same gallery of people who are really distinguished folk. And I was just astonished and delighted, of course.
Nancy's career has ranged broadly across many fields of science. She was one of the first women to be made professor at Melbourne University.
In agriculture, my particular year was a bumper year. There were 3 women in the year, which was 1942. And then I undertook a master's degree looking at bacteria in soil. Bacteria are everywhere, so it doesn't matter what you do, you encounter bacteria.
Nancy found microorganisms so fascinating, she moved her research interests to growing them on a large scale, starting with the science of making cider.
Cider is one of the old-style fermentations where apples are crushed and the juice is fermented, and a very pleasant drink it makes too.
But to make the most of products that microorganisms generate, whether for our drinking pleasure or for other purposes, production needs to be scaled up.
When you come to growing something like penicillin, which is a fussy mould, you had to grow it for days before you got the product, so there was a whole new skill had to be developed.
In the 1970s, Nancy was lucky enough to witness the discovery that would change biology forever.
A person said, oh, I wonder if we chop up the genes in one organism and extract some of them, put them into a second organism, will they express that new gene? And that was done in 1972. And that was the beginning of the whole of the recombinant DNA revolution.
Out of the growing controversy over crop experiments.
53 genetically engineered pigs got eaten by people who didn't know they weren't normal pigs.
With growing public concern over the safety of GM, the Genetic Manipulation Advisory Committee was founded. Nancy was ideally placed to head up the regulatory body.
I have never been a person who actually made genetically modified plants. That makes me somebody who hasn't an axe to grind, if you like, in that my task is looking at the risks, trying to identify them as broadly as I could, and make sure that we conducted the experiments in the safest possible way.
But by the year 2049, it is projected that our population will increase by some 60%.
We're really in serious difficulty with the amount of land available. I don't mean just Australia-wide, I mean worldwide. So how we can support another doubling of population, I find just extraordinary.
But Nancy believes current research may provide ways to increase food production for a growing population in a changing environment.
One of them is to increase drought tolerance. The other quality to improve the amount of land available is salt tolerance. You can identify the genes there and put them into crop plants. So there are a number of helpful qualities there that can be used to assist us to cope with climate change.
Nancy has been part of key scientific developments for more than 50 years. And whatever the developments in the next half-century, there's no doubt Nancy's formative work will continue to be valued. Images of astronauts floating gracefully through space gives the idea their job's pretty cushy. But the reality is, a spacewalk is no cakewalk. Conventional spacesuits are uncomfortable and can even cause serious injury. Jonica Newby travels to MIT in Boston to check out new technology designed to fix the problem and tries on the latest in spacesuit fashion.
Looks like fun, doesn't it? But it's a good thing in space no one can hear you scream, because did you know spacesuits can do this?
We've had numerous astronauts who, after extensive work inside space gloves, their fingernails have actually turned black and fallen off.
It's what astronauts don't tell you. Spacesuits are unwieldy, exhausting, and they can make your fingernails fall out. Really, how will we ever be proper space explorers with outfits like these? We need a better spacesuit. And down on Earth, at Boston's legendary MIT, is a young man who thinks he's got the right stuff to build one. Australian engineer James Waldie.
Let's go to lunar gravity.
Who's currently hanging on the low-G simulation machine. So James, I've always wanted to know, what would really happen if you didn't have a spacesuit? I mean, did the movies get it right?
No, the movies don't have it right. What happens simply is that all the oxygen is sucked out of your blood at the lung interface, and it takes about 10 to 15 seconds for that blood to reach up to your brain. And the last thing you would experience before going unconscious is your saliva boiling off your tongue.
How come?
Well, the saliva doesn't exist in that liquid state at that pressure level, so it ends up boiling off to a gas.
What a lovely last thought as you die in space. What's my saliva doing? Our bodies evolved under pressure. In the vacuum of space, all the pressure inside us wants to flow out. To solve this problem, many years ago, NASA designed a suit that would simply carry Earth's atmosphere around with us. The trouble is, well, let's show you. As you can see, NASA has very kindly lent us one of these real spacesuit gloves so I can actually experience what it feels like to wear one of these in space.
So what we're doing is evacuating 30% of an atmosphere of pressure out of this chamber here.
Okay, all fine so far. Oh, gosh, it's starting to stiffen up. That's a lot of pressure. Gosh, I can barely move my fingers now. Which seems to amuse James Waldy's boss, former astronaut Jeffrey Hoffman.
Getting tired already?
I am getting tired already.
Come on.
I don't know how you managed this. It's only been 10 minutes. And well might he laugh. Jeffrey has spent a total of 24 hours on spacewalks, most famously repairing the Hubble telescope. And while he escaped spacesuit wounds, many don't.
We've had significant injuries to hands, to shoulders. The fit of your glove is critical. These gloves, when they're pressurized, are very hard. Imagine if the crotch between your fingers, if that crotch is too long and actually pushes down between your fingers, it's like having a knife cutting into your hand. The way you lose your fingernails is if it's too tight, it can actually cut off the circulation in the end of your fingertip.
Hardly the science fiction dream. What we really need is something out of Star Trek. Something comfortable, movable, something more like this. Is this the look?
It is, yes.
This is the biosuit. The theory is that instead of external pressure being supplied by a balloon of air, it's supplied by elastic. This is only a mock-up because the real suit would be way too tight to wear on Earth.
So let me give you an idea of how strong this suit really has to compress you. When you get your blood pressure taken by the doctor, they'll pump it up until the blood actually stops flowing. But what we're going to do is pump it a little bit more, and this is currently at about 30% of an atmosphere. If this was actually applied uniformly, then you would actually feel okay.
You reckon?
That's true.
So how would you get a suit this tight on?
That's the biggest problem we have in having NASA accept this as a practical alternative to the current gas pressurised suits. And we've looked at lots of different ways. For instance, we could perhaps weave electroactive polymers into the suit itself, and we could plug it into the wall and it would relax like a pair of pyjamas. And then you just get it in
and go.
And then as the airlock pressure decreases, your suit would contract and compensate for that lack of pressure.
Unfortunately, that technology is at least a decade away. But meanwhile, many a future astronaut will worship at the shrine of James Waldy if he can just perfect the biosuit glove.
What we're trying to do is incorporate skin suit gloves onto the current suits. Then perhaps we could talk about full arm and full leg skin suit components with a gas pressurised torso. And then as we go on to Mars, then we can go to a full body elastic biosuit system.
They may not have reached the dream of lycra-clad space aerobics yet, but work on the biosuit gave James another idea, even more exciting to NASA. You see, if we're actually going to go to Mars, we need a better suit for inside the spaceship too.
There's all sorts of changes that occur to the human body when you're in the weightless environment of space. For a start, I grow 5 centimeters, about 2 inches. The whole body unloads. But without that constant pressure, your bones lose calcium.
For a Mars mission, it would take about 2.5 years. So you would come back with the hip bones of a 90-year-old.
One solution is a centrifuge, but it's a bit big for a spaceship. I'm very pleased I didn't throw up. So James had a brainwave. Could he use the same principles as the biosuit to load pressure downward?
So it's comfortable, but what it feels like is that the shoes are kind of being pulled up into me. Meanwhile, my shoulders are being pulled down.
That's right.
The suit mimics the forces that act on our body through gravity, cleverly increasing stretch to apply a little force on the shoulders, more on the hips, most on the feet. This is a fully functioning prototype, and last year James got to put it to the ultimate test on the aircraft they affectionately call the Vomit Comet.
The Vomit Comet was a dream come true, really, and we found that the suit performed almost flawlessly.
Again, there's a way to go to prove this gravity-loading suit can prevent bone loss. But if we're ever going to journey beyond our Earth, these are the kind of travel clothes we're going to need.
Boy, you land on Mars for the first time. I don't think there's many little green men there who are going to help you when you get out of your spacecraft. So you better be in good condition when you get there.
I'd love to be able to see the lights of a future lunar city twinkling. I'd love to think that some of my suits have helped us do that.
Next week on Catalyst, the complex case that puts memory on trial.
How frighteningly easy the recipe is for creating false memories.
New freedom for people with quadriplegia.
A wheelchair that makes you think.
Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Now, don't forget our fatherhood survey is still open on our website. I'm Graham Phillips. See you next time.